Oh, well, hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. Wow, I don't know what to make of this film. What a strange piece of 80s interpretation of genre that this is. So today I am discussing the 1989 Western action young rebellion film that is Young Guns. This is such a strange film. It's funny having done Society a couple of days ago, discussing the fact that, I discussed about the dystopic nature of it, the psychological thriller aspects, the Cronenberg body horror aspects, and yet what I didn't really go into much detail on was the 80s camp of it, and the fact that it has this real tacky 80s sheen that, honestly, if you tried to make today, it would feel like a parody of the era, and yet it is the authentic feeling. And it's interesting following up with this, which is so soaked in that same campy 80s style of, I don't want to call it blockbuster filmmaking, but it's almost like filmmaking for the Stand By Me generation of viewers. That it has this sort of action adventure. It's trying to be a slightly darker western, whilst also, as I say, there's something that almost feels like it's transplanted out of its own time, its own setting into the 80s time period. I'll elaborate on that in a moment. But yeah, it's such a strange beast of a film, and you definitely get that sense of, I don't know, as you're watching it, you can see like that it's going. Oh, let's go for the Western has always gone through stages of ebb and flow and fluctuation. Where there have been huge periods of success for the Westerns. Particularly in the, I'm going to sort of broadly say the 2030s, with the black and white Westerns, the 50s and into the 60s, the Westerns were big, and then we had the huge renaissance in the late 80s into the 90s. And then in the sort of mid to late 2000s, again, it tries to re-emerge. And it's had very different interpretations. It's not just been historically set Westerns. We've it's been revisioned through things like sort of neo-Western and Western hybrids like Cowboys versus Aliens, or even modern Westerns where it's the trappings of the genre but in a modern setting. Famously with something like No Country for Old Men. But you can see the ways in which Hollywood loves the Western, because there was a time when the Western was like comic book movies now, where it was just insurmountable. And I suppose when you hit the 80s period, if you're thinking of the 30-year cycle, a lot of the filmmakers and producers of the late 80s into the 90s would have grown up with the Sergio Leone era of cowboy films, and they would want to create their new vision of it. And on some degree, as a genre, it succeeded. The early 90s was a huge time for the sort of resurgence of the Western. But you can see the ways that it doesn't always work. And Young Guns is definitely a film that is an experiment of style and genre. One certain kind of style and one certain kind of genre, and they're just desperately being pushed together, even though they're not entirely compatible. I mean, from a casting and production standpoint, it makes sense that you would go for Emilio Estevez, Kiefer Sutherland, Lou Diamond Phillips, Charlie Sheen. This is the point of this was to have this cast of hot young actors who would make up the new generation of cowboys, and of course they've all come off big projects like The Lost Boys and Breakfast Club. You get that sense of, we're re-envisioning the Western as a rebellious era, and these are young rebel types. And as I said, with Society, there was that cultural revolution going on where you had sort of the young men feeling like they needed to push back against society, which was, of course, done satirically in that. But this almost feels like it's trying to capture that same ethos. And, of course, the rebellious youngster isn't exactly a new idea in cinema, all the way back to Rebel Without a Cause. But, as I said, with the Society discussion, there's something about the 80s that really brought it into focus again. Kiefer Sutherland with The Lost Boys famously is about that youthful, countercultural pushback against conformity. And this film is definitely in that same spirit in that respect. It has that same sense of, let's reimagine the Western genre. Let's reimagine Billy the Kid and his gang as a group of sort of rebellious youths in the ilk of an 80s gang, to the point where it almost feels like they're a motorcycle gang, like they're an 80s motorcycle gang, just so happen to be within 100 years earlier. Because you get that, even the opening scene where you have them all lined up and it zooms into each one saying, look at Billy the Kid, played by Emilio Estevez. Look at Doc. Look at Dick. Look at Chavez. Look at, and it does. It has them all in a line and it zooms into each one of their faces and then does a shot of them all stood there in a row as they all fire guns, almost in a we're the new era of cowboys. Remember our faces. We are the new generation of cowboys. And there is something very campy and very 80s about that. There is, actually, bringing up Lost Boys, which of course the Kiefer Sutherland link is there, but it has the same camp that the Lost Boys does, where it's not camp in terms of like a wink at the camera. It's not that it's glossy and colourful in that same way, but there's just something about the nature of the camera work, the cinematography, the performances. It almost feels, especially even like the writing, it almost feels like like it's still being written as if they are 80s teenagers, or they're supposed to be in their 20s, but they keep referring to them as boys because it's supposed to be, like I say, that youthful 80s rebellion. And again, the dialogue is that. It's not period authentic dialogue. It's, cool guy 80s dialogue. And immediately this film could lose you. And I can see why it's critically, very mixed feelings about it, because you could easily drop off this film. The thing that I think got me through, and I think I've talked about this several times now, most recently with the Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, but bringing in a prominent established actor who has the gravitas to be able to carry the first act of the film is absolutely the power move. And having Terence Stamp is be this sort of guide for the boys and the guy who brings them together and looks after them and teaches them to read, and he's the his death being the inciting incident that causes them to go off the rails. His performance is great in this. And I know, that the nature of the film is, that the story is that they will go off to get vengeance for his murder. And so you're watching that first act thinking, I don't want Terence Stamp to not be in this film, but we know he gets killed. And once you've lost him, there is a certain, as I've said several times, you lose that gravitas to it. And the hope is that the other actors are now sort of as an ensemble, or your lead, Emilio Estevez, is strong enough to then carry the rest of the film. And I have to say, this is a great performance by Emilio Estevez as Billy the Kid. He really does push the line between someone who genuinely wants retribution, who's also a little bit crazed and almost wants to be gunned down, to a more traditional hero, to someone who actually has like political strategy, who's like, if I can keep committing crimes and getting vigilante justice against all these people who I see as wrong, then I can get enough attention on us publicly and by the United States government, And even though there are moments where he is definitely off the reservation, he is really, really like wild, and the others are really starting to lose faith in him and think this guy's nuts. He's going to get us all killed. You get that sense of admittedly he is, but there is something else. There are layers to that mania that is going on in his character, and I think he does do that really well. But yeah, this is a very strange film. This is such a strange film because I don't know. It's very much a case of maybe I was in a good mood to watch it because I really was engaged with it, and I was intrigued by all these different tones and colours and this like 80s tint to it that really made me kind of want to see where this was going and actually invest in the story. But I don't know objectively whether it worked. I mean, on some level it doesn't. It doesn't feel... It feels very strange, like this film could only exist in a vacuum, because, yeah, it's such an odd beast. There could only be one of these films. This wasn't going to be the paradigm shift of the Western genre, just because it's so strange. It's so strange, and I genuinely wouldn't... I would completely understand if someone said, I absolutely hated this, because it is like a... Yeah, this is very... It's a difficult pill to swallow, I suppose. It's a very acquired taste. But, as I say, a different kind of Western. I would like to go and watch more traditional stuff at some point, but I'll save that for a little while now. But yeah, I'm always pleased to be surprised. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because this will help me in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded, and check out my back catalogue of over 200 videos. Follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I tweet about TV shows and films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.